Warhammer. Available in stores now. Order now and you will receive.
Today, we're going to be doing something special. We're going back in time. That's right, we found some old White Dwarf articles on making old terrain, and we thought, hell, let's just go and do some old school terrain, some old cardboard folding, and with a special twist, we're going to have some extra miniatures as well. But we're going to dive in and start going through these old articles.
So I have a very important job in today's video, and that's going through all of these classic White Dwarf articles and books and seeing if I can find anything in here that we can make terrain out of. Now there is a whole heap of old White Dwarfs to go through. I believe they've just passed issue 500, so we're just going to stick with the really old retro ones, the ones where the cover was made from artwork, and there's a ton of really cool stuff in here. While perusing these old magazines, I did find an overall theme to most of them, and there was a huge amount of guides and terrain options for you to build at home. In one of the issues I found, it told you how to make your own brick walls and barbed wire fences. Another issue I found, which was very cool, was a White Dwarf dedicated to the Sisters of Battle, featuring the John Blanche art on the front cover, and it even came with a paper cathedral that you could build up. Again, I'm not going to do it for this video, but this is very, very cool. And while I have built a cathedral before for another video, I still think that this is an awesome idea, and I actually would love to get my hands on this issue to try and build this paper cathedral. I think it's very cute. But the issue I'm going to focus on today is issue 169. This issue contained a paper bunker that you could push out and make up to have your own pieces of terrain. And while I don't have the physical issue to actually use this, I will be printing out a couple of test prints of the bunker and making them up in the studio. But there's a couple of things to mention here. As you can tell, these issues have been photocopied, so they're not being laid down completely flat. So printing this out means it's going to be skewed just a little bit, meaning that maybe some of the edges won't line up. I won't really know until I start cutting it out and making it, but this photocopy looks like a pretty good base to build up either way. I also had two options with my printing choices. I could print it out of paper, or I could try to use a higher GCM paper, which is basically a card. So I printed out the first version on paper and everything was looking pretty good. However, I wasn't too sure if this would hold up in play action, so I decided to try and print it on card instead. After playing around with the printer a couple of times, I got out a pretty good print and took this as the final option to bring downstairs and start making up. Heading back downstairs, I cut everything out using a hobby knife just to make sure those edges were nice and precise, and even grabbed Murray to give me a hand on building it all up. It only took a couple of minutes to build this bunker with a little bit of trial and error, but in the end, I was pretty happy with how they turned out. And this is what it looks like fully dried and pretty much ready to go. And I'm actually really impressed with these. I think these are kind of cute in their like charming sort of way. It reminds me very much of the terrain you can get for Drop Zone Commander. I remember in their starter kit, they had some paper terrain that you could build up, which is fantastic if you were getting into the game for the first time and you just wanted some stuff to play with. It's very reminiscent of that style, and I think that this is super cute, super accessible, and it's just kind of fun. So yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out. Let me know what you guys think. If you think we should make up some more paper terrain, or if you think this is kind of like mid compared to what they offer these days. This was completely free though, I will say, so it's kind of hard to compare.
For free. And that's a great price.
So either way, I'm really happy with how this turned out. So let's head over to see what Murray is currently up to, painting those retro space bears.
Alright, no terrain project is complete without models to go on it, right? And if we're going to do terrain from the 90s, then it makes sense that we want models from the 90s. So I've got some old Space Marines, and I'm going to paint these up. And I had a really cool idea that I would paint them like space bears. What would the space bears look like if they were from the 90s? Really a lot more vibrant. No streak and grime, so they're going to look a lot more clean. That's what we're going to do, and they'll be really cool for the reveals later. So I'm going to make some Space Marines. Now, Games Workshop's plastic injection molding has certainly come a long way. A lot of people still hold to the charm of old Space Marines, but I cannot get past all these mold lines and flashings. It is a pain in the butt. And when it comes to conversions, not too much used to be done. There was a lot of palette swapping and head swapping perhaps, but nothing that we do these days to make our armies stand out and be so unique around the world. And then I noticed that the rebreather on the unhelmeted Space Marine looked very much like the sort of snout Space Bear's muzzles that they have on all their helmets. So I decided to use that as sort of like the origins for that appearance. And thus it's going to make a perfect Sergeant head. Now, since I want to create the Space Bears in a time before the Space Bears existed, I'm going to go with a bit of a different technique. Basically, absolutely no streak and grime. We're living in the era of goblin green bases, so I'm gonna have these look really, really clean. But to get that sort of dirt tinted appearance, I'm gonna mix a bit of brown in with the gray that I'm gonna use for the overall armor color of the Space Bears. So effectively, they're gonna be a fairly desaturated gray-brown. In my brain, it's gonna be almost like a really dark khaki. And then of course we have the rest of the iconic splashes of red and brass trim. And then with some nice clean line highlights, these Space Bears are done and looking amazing.
So here I am again in tabletop time, and I had previously made up this piece of terrain, but I had mentioned I wanted to make a couple of changes to this guy. Looking at him now, I think that he's an okay size, but I would like to make it just a little bit bigger. I think I'd like to be able to put a couple of models up here if possible. I think just bigger is better, plus the size comparison would be nice as well. I also want to change the color as well. Maybe go for more of like a rusty red or something, which is really easy to do, and I'm going to take you through that process, and we're going to print up another one of these. Let's do it. So jumping into Photoshop with the photocopy that we had used before, all I need to do was just make some color adjustments to the original file. I played around with a couple of choices, but I definitely stuck to that rusty red because I thought this would be a really good contrast with the blue bunker. After that was finished, all I needed to do was print this out again. However, this time the printer had decided it had had enough of me and didn't really want a bar of what I was printing. So this took a little bit of trial and error to get it right. Eventually, I did get a print I was happy with, but there are some ink splatters here, which is a little bit disappointing. But for a rough concept idea, just to even see if this works, I thought I'd cut my losses and just accept that there's some wear and tear on this particular building, which is completely fine. Again, I have to stress that this photocopy is slightly skewed, so when building this thing up, it was probably more difficult than the first time. This bunker is on 2 different pages, so it was really hard to align these pages at the same size, which meant that some pieces didn't exactly fit into others, but after a little bit of pushing and pulling and just a ton of glue, eventually I got it to work. And with that all said and done, both of my bunkers were finished and ready for play. So here are my tiny little bunkers. It looks like they have like a Squidward face on the front of it. I don't know if you've noticed that. I think these are super cute. I really like these a lot. I kind of wish that these were a piece of terrain that Games Workshop sells. They probably do, and I've just missed it. But either way, I'm really happy with these. I think if you can get your hands on something like this or this template, absolutely. You can do a Google search and it comes up, which is really handy. And if you're looking for terrain, but you want it to be a little bit themey, you just don't want to use like cereal boxes and stuff, this is great. Also took me a couple minutes to print and build as well, so make a hobby day out of it, which is pretty cute. So those buildings are all done, and that's all I'm going to print up for today because I have another bit of this project I need to work on. I get to paint up some models from my favorite faction, and I couldn't be more excited. That's right, I'm joining Murray in his retro painting style and painting up some Dark Eldar that I think are gonna fit right at home in our little scene. So I'm out here spraying my models and it is so freaking cold. Oh my God, it is literally the middle of winter in Australia. And we live at the bottom side of Australia. We've mentioned this a couple of times before, how cold it is. But I just want to show you guys because it's incredible. Oh my God, like what the f? Why is it so cold? It's frozen. That was literally frozen together. It is so cold. I'm gonna try to spray these guys. The sun is coming out, thank goodness. I'm trying to spray these guys with my handy dandy Chaos Black. Hopefully they don't freeze in the process and then go back inside. With the buildings all done, it's time for me to start painting up these Dark Eldar models. Murray had kindly cut out all of the pieces that I needed to start assembling these guys, and I said to him to just go completely wild and pick whatever he thought looked cool. We also found the original assembly guide for these guys, which is hilariously 1 page, and it kind of just says these are the pieces and slap it together, versus the massive booklet you get these days to try and build your guys up. So I've already built and painted these guys up in a previous video when I was going through the history of the Drukhari faction, and I'm going to paint them up pretty much the same way with a few small changes. Giving them a dark green dry brush just to start off with, and layering that up to a brighter green, making them look like the Green Goblin from Spider-Man.
Hello, my idea.
Also keeping in theme, I painted their eyes and the ruffles coming out of their heads in a red, and then moved on to their weapons. Last time I opted for non-metallic metal, which I decided absolutely against this time, opting for silver and a bronze. I then washed these down with Cygor Brown and Black Legion, just to give the weapons a little bit of depth, and left this to dry. Murray had only painted up 3 of his Space Bears, so to make things nice and even, I only painted up 3 of these Dark Eldar guys, which took me probably about half an hour to paint up and was a really easy process. So with the final colors put onto my Dark Eldar and Murray Space Bears, I could move on to putting on the final touches for these models. And there wasn't too much work to do here, but these little touches I know would really bring in that retro vibe that we're used to in our Warhammer. The first step being the bases. I needed to put a bright, vivid, sickly green on these bases with a little bit of flock on top, just to really give it that retro feel. While I don't have any goblin green specifically at the studio, I did my best by using a Vallejo color of a similar shade. I also made sure to trim the edges of these bases as well, again in that sickly green color. And I don't know what it is about this simple touch that really does make these seem like retro Warhammer figurines. Another thing we had and art about was putting on a paper banner on the leader of the Space Bears. Doing a little bit of research, you can actually find the paper banners in old copies of White Dwarf. I wasn't able to specifically find any, but I'd seen some videos where people had, and I think that this was a pretty cool touch. Again, back in the day, I don't know why Games Workshop doesn't do this anymore, but I think it's really, really fun. To make my Space Bears banner, all I had to do was cut out a piece of paper, roughly measuring out the size of the banner, and then cutting this out. I coated it in a couple of layers of matte varnish, just to make sure that the paint wouldn't tear through the paper. Once this was dried, I sketched on my simple design and started painting it up. Of course, I had to include that iconic Space Bears hand, so I made sure this was the focal point of the banner. I just wanted to keep this super clean and simple, no tears or anything like that. And then I covered the whole thing in Mod Podge and glued it on top of the banner post. And here he is all done, and I think he looks so good. I really am proud with the paper banner. I've never done something like this before. I think I always turn to green stuff because it's more of a modern technique, I guess. But for this being made out of paper, I don't know, I think it's kind of charming and cute, and I really like it. So I'm really happy I got to do this special touch to this guy in particular, and I love all the models that I have painted today as well. So that's pretty much it for my segment or portion of this video. But Dave has surprised me and decided to join in on all the fun, so let's go check up what he's up to.
You might be wondering, Dave, where have you been? You didn't help Jen and Murray on the last video and you weren't on this one. Well, I've been very busy. I've been actually preparing our stage 2, our final stretch goals for our Kickstarter, as well as the Lucha Vera minis we did, which I might remind you, you can grab on the web store, and it helps to support the channel, so check out the links in the description. But I'm gonna help Jen and Murray by doing something that I think is iconic. They're building some cool retro stuff. You need a game board, right? Like, it's gotta have some crazy bright green flock, maybe some little foam hills or something like that. So I'm gonna chuck some stuff together while I've got files downloading on the computer. Let's do it. So the board is really simple. When I want to do quick terrain that looks good, I use sponges. A sponge on some brown and then some goblin green. By using sponges, you get a really rough texture. And if you do it quickly enough, when you apply the green on top of the brown will still be partly wet and you'll blend it in areas. And you get this great gradient that looks like grass from a distance. But that would not be enough because we're going for retro hammer, which means we need obnoxious bright green static grass. So I'm gonna bring out this thing, which I never fail to electrocute myself with. So my nemesis, let's do it. Wish me luck. And amazingly, no electrocutions. So that board is done quick snap. And we have a nice little backdrop that is very reminiscent of Oldhammer. All right, board done. Next step for blitzing some terrain old style is I'm gonna make some foam hills in a couple of different ways. So first of all, you need some foam, preferably XPS foam you can get from hardware stores. It's like insulation foam. And you probably want it in different sizes than this. That made like a sonic boom, my ears are ringing. Your ears ringing? Yeah. That made like a flashbang. All you want to do is cut these hills at a slight angle with a craft knife in an odd shape. And that's your first way of doing it. It's that easy. And then you just cover it in PVA glue and a little bit of paint and flock the same way as I did the previous bit of terrain. Now for the second method, we're going to make it a bit interesting by cutting directly down with the knife and wiggling it around a little bit, creating some strange variants on the surface. And then I'm going to get a ball of bunched up tin foil and crunch it into that foam, giving it a nice bit of rough texture. This allows me to have some rocky sides that I can paint grey with a dry brush, while the rest of the hill I did in the same way as the first one. This is super basic, like 90s early wargaming stuff, but it's fantastic for filling out a table really quickly and cheaply. And that's it. We've done our retro Warhammer terrain. I think it was super quick, super easy, but it evokes that White Dwarf 90s feel. So I hope you enjoyed. Maybe it gave you a bit of a nostalgia trip. I'm really excited to see what Murray and Jen have been playing around with from those old books. So let's check out some reveals. Thanks for allowing me to come visit you in this video, everyone.
Battle the nefarious Dark Eldar versus the heroic Space Marines in Warhammer. Available in stores now. Order now and you will receive crippling addiction. Warning, batteries not included.
And this is that very special part in the video where we get to thank all of our patrons over on, well, you guessed it, Patreon. It's with your help and support that we can make amazing videos, and it is so cool to be able to do this as a job. Everything from Patreon goes back into tabletop time, so please consider supporting us. All of the links will be down in the description below. You get awesome perks for joining up today, so make sure you check out the links in the description below. And a massive thank you again to all of our patrons.
Got him. Surprise, Vaughn!
Sorry, that was our little deep dive into Warhammer back in the 90s, essentially.
So we've come so far.
Yeah, it was actually really fun to make up these minis, and the terrain I think is pretty cool too. I kind of wish the Games Workshop did this, even now.
Yeah, like it's pretty simple, but it's pretty accessible. And like you could make easy terrain for this, like any faction. That'd be really cool. And like, sure, you can make your awesome like plastic injection molded terrain for whatever, but this is kind of fun.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Do you think we should maybe make up some designs of our own? Alicia is an amazing artist. We could do some like space bear buildings or something.
It's a possibility.
That could be pretty cool.
Well, we hope that you enjoyed our little nonsense today. And if you want to check out any more of our videos, the links are in the description. And if you want to support the channel, the link to our website is down below where you can buy merch, all sorts of cool shirts, even a mug. And you can also buy our miniatures.
Yes, we have a new line of miniatures for our roleplay campaign Lucha Vera, and there's some very cool stuff in there, so make sure you go ahead and check them out.
As well as the actual space bears themselves. So until then, see you later.